Something doesn't add up inside the Cleveland Browns, and fans are starting to notice. Because on one side, reports are claiming that Deshaun Watson is already leading the quarterback race. But on the other side, insiders and even the coaching staff are saying the competition is still completely open. So which one is it? Things got even more intense after a viral report from Mary Kay Cabot exploded online, racking up massive attention and instantly shaping the narrative around Shedeur Sanders. But almost immediately, that narrative was challenged, not just by fans, but by voices much closer to the situation. And then came the controversy involving Shedeur Sanders that took this story far beyond football. Now it's not just about who starts. It's about what's real, what's being pushed, and what might be happening behind the scenes. Because once you start connecting the dots, this story looks very different. It all started with a single post, but the reaction was anything but small. When Mary Kay Cabot reported that Deshaun Watson had already gained an edge over Shedeur Sanders, it didn't just inform fans, it shaped the narrative overnight. The tweet quickly exploded, pulling in massive attention and spreading across the NFL community. Suddenly, what was supposed to be an open quarterback competition started to feel decided. And that's where the tension began. Because if you think about it, this report came very early. We're talking about a stage where practices are still limited, chemistry is still building, and players are barely getting into rhythm. So when a statement like one quarterback is already ahead drops this soon, people start asking questions. Is this actual insight? Or is it jumping the gun? That's exactly what fans began debating. Some took the report at face value. After all, Mary Kay has been covering the Browns for years. She's known to have connections inside the organization. So to many, this wasn't just a random opinion. It felt like inside information. But others weren't buying it. Because this isn't the first time her takes have been questioned. There have been moments in the past where her predictions or evaluations didn't fully match what eventually played out on the field. And because of that, a growing number of fans started treating this latest report with caution. Not dismissing it completely, but definitely not accepting it blindly either. And that's when the phrase started spreading. Take it with a grain of salt. Now here, where things get interesting. When a report like this gains traction, it doesn't just stay as information, it becomes influence. It affects how fans view the players. It affects how discussions are framed. And in some cases, it can even create pressure inside the organization itself. Because now, every move is being watched through that lens. If Watson takes first-team reps, it reinforces the report. If Shedeur gets opportunities, it raises eyebrows. Everything suddenly feels like evidence. And that's how narratives grow, not from confirmed decisions, but from early interpretations. But just as this narrative started settling in, something unexpected happened. Someone close to the situation stepped in and didn't just disagree, they challenged the entire tone of the conversation. And what happened next turned this from a football story into a full-blown controversy. Just when the conversation was settling around that report, everything took a sharp turn. Because Shedeur Sanders stepped in, and what he said instantly changed the tone of the entire situation. Instead of a quiet disagreement or subtle pushback, his response came across direct, emotional, and impossible to ignore. The comment quickly spread across social media, pulling in reactions from fans, analysts, and even people outside the football world. And just like that, this wasn't just about quarterbacks anymore. It became a controversy. Now, depending on who you ask, the reaction to Shedeur's comment has been completely split. Some fans backed him immediately. They felt like he was standing up for Shedeur Sanders, defending him against what they believed was unfair or premature criticism. To them, it wasn't just about one report. It was about a pattern of narratives forming too quickly. Others, though, saw it very differently. They felt the comment crossed a line, that regardless of frustration, responding publicly in that way only added unnecessary tension and distraction, especially for a player still trying to establish himself professionally. And that's where things got even more complicated. Because now the focus shifted from who's winning the QB battle to was that response appropriate? The football conversation got overshadowed. But here's the deeper layer. Moments like this don't just create headlines, they reveal something underneath. Emotion, frustration, pressure. Because when someone reacts that strongly, it usually doesn't come out of nowhere. It suggests there's more happening behind the scenes than what fans are seeing publicly. Now, to be clear, we don't know everything. There's no confirmed tension, no official statements pointing to internal conflict. But the reaction itself, that's real, and it opened the door to a bigger question. Is this situation affecting more than just performance? Because when media narratives, player emotions, and public perception all collide at the same time, it creates a kind of pressure that's hard to ignore. And that pressure can change how everything plays out. What makes this even more interesting is how quickly the story evolved. Within hours, the focus wasn't just on Shedur's comment, it shifted back to the original report, but now with a completely different energy. People weren't just discussing it, they were questioning it. Who's right? Who's exaggerating? Who actually knows what's going on? And that's when the conversation took another unexpected turn. Because suddenly, insiders and analysts started stepping in, and what they said only made things more confusing. As the reaction to Shedeur Sanders' comment kept spreading, the spotlight swung right back to the original report. But this time, people weren't just reading it, they were dissecting it. Because once doubt enters the conversation, everything changes. Now fans weren't asking what was said, they were asking how reliable it actually was. The biggest debate, whether Mary Kay Cabot was sharing confirmed inside information, or simply offering an early interpretation that got presented like a conclusion. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. Because in today's sports world, one strong statement can instantly shape public perception, even if the situation itself is still evolving. Some analysts pushed back on the report, pointing out that it's simply too early to declare any clear leader, with limited practices and constant rotation between quarterbacks. Labeling one player ahead might be more assumption than reality. Others went a step further. They brought up past moments where bold claims didn't fully match what eventually played out, not as an attack, but as a reminder that even experienced reporters can get things wrong, especially in fluid situations like a quarterback competition. And just like that, the phrase, "take it with a grain of salt," started gaining even more traction. But here where it gets tricky. At the same time, there are people who strongly believe that Mary Kay is plugged in, that her long history covering the Browns gives her access most others don't have. And if that's true, then her report might not be speculation at all. It might be a reflection of what's being said internally. So now you've got two completely different interpretations of the same information. One side sees insight, the other sees assumption. And when that kind of split happens, it creates uncertainty. Because fans don't know what to trust anymore. And uncertainty leads to something powerful, speculation. People start connecting dots, reading between lines, looking for hidden meaning in every quote, every practice rep, every small update. And that's exactly what's happening here. Because while the media debate keeps going back and forth, another layer of the story quietly started gaining attention. One that doesn't just involve reporting, but involves what might be happening inside the Browns organization itself. Because when analysts began breaking down the situation deeper, one particular theory started standing out, and it came from a very familiar voice in the sports world. And what he suggested added a whole new level to this story. Just when the debate was stuck between report versus reaction, a new angle entered the picture, and it shifted everything. Because Skip Bayless stepped in with a theory that didn't just question the report, it questioned the motive behind the entire situation. And once that idea was introduced, fans couldn't stop thinking about it. According to his take, this might not simply be about who's playing better right now. Instead, it could be tied to something much deeper: ownership, investment, and long-term justification. At the center of that theory is Jimmy Haslam. The Browns made a massive commitment to Deshaun Watson, one of the biggest financial bets in recent NFL history. And when you invest that much into a player, it's not just about performance anymore, it becomes about proving that decision was right. Now, to be clear, this is still speculation. There's no confirmed statement from inside the Browns saying this is how decisions are being made. But the logic behind it, that's what caught people's attention. Because it raises a simple but powerful question. If you've invested that heavily in a quarterback, wouldn't you want him to succeed? Not just as a player, but as validation. Some fans believe that this could subtly influence how the competition is being viewed, not in an obvious or unfair way, but in the kind of quiet pressure that exists in every major organization. Others, however, completely reject that idea. They argue that no NFL team, especially one trying to win, would prioritize pride or past decisions over actual performance on the field. That at the end of the day, whoever gives the team the best chance to win will play. No exceptions. And that's where the divide gets even sharper. Because both arguments sound reasonable. One is rooted in business reality. The other is rooted in competitive integrity. And the Browns are sitting right in the middle of that tension. What makes this even more interesting is how it connects back to everything we've already seen. The early report, the strong reaction, the growing skepticism. It all starts to feel like pieces of a bigger puzzle. Because if there is even a small amount of pressure tied to past decisions, it could explain why the narrative feels slightly tilted, even if the actual competition is still ongoing. But just when it seemed like this theory might take over the conversation, another voice stepped in, this time from inside the team itself. And what he said didn't just challenge the narrative. It reset the entire situation back to square one. Just as the outside noise reached its peak, the message from inside the Browns organization cut straight through it. And it was simple. Slow down. Because according to Todd Monken, the entire conversation might be getting ahead of itself. When asked about the quarterback situation, his response didn't confirm a leader, it didn't hint at a favorite, and it definitely didn't match the idea that things were already decided. Instead, he made one thing very clear: it's too early. We're talking about a stage where the team has only had a handful of practices, limited reps, minimal live situations, barely enough time to truly evaluate consistency, chemistry, or decision-making under pressure. In other words, not nearly enough to crown a starter. And that alone changes how everything should be viewed. Because if the person actually overseeing the offense isn't ready to make a decision yet, then any strong claims about who's ahead suddenly feel premature. Monken also hinted at something else that often gets overlooked. Evaluation doesn't just happen in practice. It happens over time, through repetition, through real game scenarios, through situations where pressure is real, not simulated. That's why he suggested the decision might stretch deeper into the offseason, possibly even into preseason games, where both Deshaun Watson and Shedeur can be tested in conditions that actually resemble real football. And that's a key detail, because it reinforces the idea that this competition isn't just alive. It's wide open. Now, does that mean both quarterbacks are on equal footing right now? Not necessarily. There's still a natural edge when it comes to experience. Watson has been in the league, seen defenses, handled game speed at the highest level. That matters, especially early in camp settings. But that doesn't automatically translate to winning the job. Because as Monken subtly pointed out, what matters most isn't what happens in controlled environments. It's what happens when it counts. And he said it in the simplest way possible. If you want to stop the noise, play well. Win games. That's it. No narratives, no speculation, no debates. Performance settles everything. And that's where this entire story starts to shift again. Because if the decision truly comes down to performance in real situations, then the conversation isn't just about who looks better right now. It's about who shows up when the lights are on. And that's where things get even more interesting. Because when you compare how these two quarterbacks operate in different environments, you start to see a difference that numbers and practice reports don't fully capture. Here, where the conversation takes another turn, because not all performance is created equal. There's a big difference between how players look in practice and how they perform when the lights are on. And that difference is exactly what's fueling this debate. When it comes to controlled environments like training sessions, Deshaun Watson has a clear advantage. He's a veteran. He understands timing, reads, and how to operate within structure. In practice, that experience shows up immediately: quick decisions, clean throws, and overall efficiency. It's the kind of performance that looks polished, the kind that stands out in early evaluations. But here's the thing. Practice isn't the game. And that's where Shedeur enters the conversation in a completely different way. Because what Shedeur brings isn't always something you can fully measure in practice reps. It shows up in moments, in chaos, in real-time pressure. There's been growing buzz among fans and analysts that Shedeur has a certain presence, the ability to extend plays, stay composed under pressure, and bring an energy that teammates feed off of. The kind of leadership that doesn't always show up on a stat sheet, but becomes obvious when the game is actually happening. Now, to be clear, this isn't a confirmed edge. It's a perception based on flashes and observations, but it's a perception that's gaining traction. Because people have seen glimpses of it before. That instinct, that confidence, that ability to make something out of nothing. And those are the traits that often separate good quarterbacks from game-changing ones. At the same time, Watson's experience still carries weight. He's been through big moments. He's led teams before. And if he finds his rhythm again, there's no doubt he can perform at a high level. But that's also part of the uncertainty. Because while we've seen what Watson can be, we haven't consistently seen it recently. And that leaves the door open. Wide open. So now the Browns are facing a situation that isn't just about skill. It's about timing. Do you trust the proven player to return to form? Or do you take a chance on the rising player who might bring something new? That's the real decision. And it's not as simple as comparing practice reps. Because when everything speeds up, when pressure hits, when the game is on the line, that's when the difference becomes clear. And that's exactly why this competition might not be decided until both quarterbacks are put into real game situations. Because until then, you're not seeing the full picture. And once that full picture starts to come into focus, that's when the biggest question of all finally takes center stage. Just when it feels like this decision should come down to talent alone, another factor quietly steps in, and it changes everything. Money. Because no matter how much fans want this to be a pure football decision, the reality is, the NFL is also a business. And the Browns are deeply invested in Deshaun Watson. We're talking about one of the biggest guaranteed contracts in league history. A commitment that doesn't just sit on paper, it affects roster building, cap space, and long-term planning. When a team puts that kind of money behind a player, it naturally creates pressure. Not just to play him, but to justify the investment. Now, some fans believe this could influence the decision more than people want to admit. The idea is simple. If two quarterbacks are even remotely close in performance, the one with the massive contract might get the edge. Not because he's clearly better, but because the organization has more tied to him. At the same time, others strongly disagree with that logic. They argue that no serious team trying to win games would make a decision based on money alone. That if Shedeur Sanders gives the team a better chance to succeed, he has to play regardless of contracts, expectations, or past investments. And honestly, both sides make valid points. Because while teams say decisions are based on performance, financial reality is always part of the equation, even if it's not openly discussed. But here, where the conversation gets even more interesting, there's another layer being talked about among fans, one that goes beyond contracts and into something bigger: future value. Some believe that starting Shedeur could actually benefit the Browns long-term. A younger quarterback, growing within the system, building chemistry early. It could set the foundation for years to come. And then there's the energy factor. The excitement. The buzz. There's a growing belief that Shedeur brings a certain star power, the kind that can elevate not just the offense but the entire atmosphere around the team. More attention, more engagement, a different kind of momentum. Again, this is speculation. There's no official statement saying the Browns are thinking this way. But the conversation itself is real. Because when you combine performance, money, future planning, and fan energy, you're no longer looking at a simple quarterback decision. You're looking at a franchise decision. And that's why this situation feels so intense. Because no matter what choice is made, it won't just affect one season. It will shape the direction of the Browns moving forward. And with everything now on the table, media narratives, player reactions, coaching evaluations, and financial pressure, we're finally approaching the moment where all of it comes together. The moment where the Browns have to decide what matters most. And when that decision is made, there won't be any more debate. Only consequences. After all the noise, all the debates, and all the speculation, this entire situation is now heading toward one defining moment. Because sooner or later, the Browns have to make a choice. And when they do, it won't just answer who starts at quarterback. It will reveal what the organization truly values. If Deshaun Watson gets the nod, the message is clear. Experience, investment, and proven history still matter most. It would show that the Browns believe he can return to form and justify everything they've built around him. But if the decision goes to Shedeur Sanders, that's a completely different signal. It would mean the team is ready to embrace change, ready to bet on potential, energy, and long-term upside, even if it comes with uncertainty. And here's what makes this moment even more intense. There's no outcome that avoids pressure. Starting Watson brings expectations tied to his contract and past success. Every game becomes a test of whether he can still perform at that level. Starting Shedeur, on the other hand, comes with a different kind of pressure, proving that the team didn't move too soon, that the potential everyone sees can actually translate into results. Either way, the spotlight gets brighter, and fans are already preparing for it. Some are waiting for confirmation, convinced they already know how this will play out. Others are expecting a surprise, believing that everything we've heard so far doesn't fully reflect what's actually happening. Because if there's one thing this entire situation has shown, it's that perception and reality don't always match. Reports say one thing, insiders hint at another, and the truth, it's still unfolding. There's also another key detail that can't be ignored: timing. Even when the Browns name a starter, that doesn't mean the story ends there. The NFL season is unpredictable. Performance swings, injuries, and adjustments can shift everything in a matter of weeks, which means this decision might not be final. It might just be the beginning, a starting point for a season-long evaluation. Because at the end of the day, fans won't remember who was ahead in early reports or off-season debates. They'll remember who delivered when it mattered, who took control, who led the team when the pressure was highest. And when that moment comes, there won't be any more speculation, no more theories, no more narratives, just results. And those results will tell the real story. After everything, the reports, the reactions, the controversy, and the theories, it all comes down to one simple reality. None of it matters until the games begin. Because right now, fans are caught between two worlds. One built on headlines, where Deshaun Watson is already ahead, and another built on uncertainty, where Shedeur Sanders is still very much in the fight. And the truth is, both can exist at the same time. Because early reports don't decide seasons. Practice reps don't define legacies. And narratives, no matter how loud, don't win games. What wins games is performance, execution, consistency when it actually counts. That's why everything we've seen so far should be viewed for what it is, pieces of a much bigger story that hasn't fully played out yet. Even the controversy involving Shedeur Sanders, as intense as it felt, is just part of the noise that surrounds high-stakes situations like this. It adds emotion, it adds pressure, but it doesn't decide outcomes. And neither do opinions. Not from reporters, not from analysts, not even from fans. Because when the Browns finally take the field, all of that disappears. There are no narratives between the lines, no speculation in the huddle, just decisions, execution, and results. And that's where the real answer is going to come from. Not from who looked better in shorts, not from who got more buzz online, but from who can lead when everything is on the line. So as much as people want clarity right now, it's not coming yet. Because this story was never meant to be decided in the off-season. It was always meant to unfold in real time, under pressure, in front of everyone. And when it finally does, that's when we'll know if the early reports were right, or if everything we thought we knew was completely wrong. At the end of the day, this isn't just about Deshaun Watson or Shedeur Sanders. It's about what's real versus what's being said. Reports, reactions, and controversy have blurred the picture, but the truth is simple. When the season starts, none of the noise matters. Because the only thing that will decide this story is who shows up when it counts.